Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today is Saturday, October 27th, 2018, and this will be the final October 2018 Senate election prediction that I will be doing for, of course, the midterm year this year. So the election is 10 days away. This is getting very, very close. Leading into the final week, I will begin to do daily predictions, so around November 1st, November 2nd, and then leading up into the election, I will do daily videos. The election is on November 6th, 2018. Make sure you go out and vote, if you can vote, of course, and go ahead and vote for whoever you think is fit for your Senate election, governor election if you have one, and House, of course, election that everyone does have. So we start off this map with 23 Democrats and 42 Republicans. The last election prediction I had was 48 Democrats, one toss-up race, and 52 Republicans. We're going to see a little bit difference in terms of the ratings for either side, but a couple states are going to swap places with one another in terms of toss-ups, lean Republican and lean Democrat. So looking at the current composition of the United States Senate, we have 49 Democrats, of course 47 Democrats with 2 independents who caucus with them. In case you don't know, that green over in Maine and Vermont means it's an independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party, thus adding to their numbers, and 51 Republicans just solely identifying with the Republican Party. Looking at the map that we start off with 42 Republican seats, it seems like the GOP would do phenomenal. We're looking at a number of states, 10 states to be exact, that Donald Trump won in 2016 that currently have Democratic incumbents on top of the already Republican seats in the Senate races. So based off those numbers alone, the GOP could be at 56, 57 based off the Trump states in 2016, but unfortunately for them, they are not. The Democrats have 23 seats, which means that most of their seats right now are up in this sole election. So it will come down to very, very close races for the Democratic Party. If this is any other type of map in this type of year, the Democratic Party definitely would be at a much better advantage. If you took the 2016 map and threw it on to this election, the Democratic Party would have no doubt at taking back the majority. But unfortunately for them, it's not. So this map, although it's an anti-Republican wave year, this map definitely favors the Republicans very heavily. So we're going to look down to these individual races and where they're actually going in terms of the party composition at the end of 2018. So we'll start off with the safe Democratic states. We aren't really going to see that many safe Republican states, which is why I want to start off with the Democratic states so you can actually see which ones are truly safe for either political party. Going up to the Northeast, of course, Maine and Vermont, again, with that green dot means that they are independent to caucus with the Democratic Party. So essentially that adds to their numbers, which is why there's also a green box around here adding to their total. So we're going to finish off with the safe states for the Democratic Party at this point. A little bit more contested races in terms of out of the safe states, Virginia and New Mexico. These are two states that currently have pretty good GOP candidates, just the year is not right. The candidates on the Democratic Party are too strong, or the GOP candidates maybe too weak in case of New Mexico, where Gary Johnson possibly could be outperforming the GOP candidate at the end of the day. So right now this puts the Democrats at 37 seats, the Republicans at 42, and we're going to go ahead and look at some other safe and Democratic states at this point in time, states like Michigan and Pennsylvania. These are two states that Donald Trump won in 2016. The argument always is that these races would have gotten closer leading into the election. Unfortunately for the GOP, they have not. Okay, this race has been likely Democratic and safe Democratic since I began my channel back in June of 2017, not 2016. But when we're looking at those, I guess, overall numbers, they've been consistent. Double-digit leads for Debbie Stabenow and double-digit leads for Bob Casey. The argument has always been amongst these Republicans in both of these states that these races will narrow down. They have not. In terms of the governor elections in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, they are still in the Democratic column, even though they have a Republican incumbent in Michigan and then a Democratic incumbent in Pennsylvania, but it is a Trump state in 2016. These races are not narrowing down. What is very surprising is that the state of Ohio is now moving into the safe column. This was characterized as safe in my most previous prediction, but it's just coming out as a state that was won by Trump by around 10% in 2016, that all of a sudden now is a safe Democratic state. If you look back at the Senate election back in 2016, the race was originally contested. And then Strickland just went down in the polls, then the incumbent Porter went up drastically, and then it was no longer contested by the end of 2016, even though the state itself may have been or was supposed to be contested. Now looking at 2018, Josh Mandel entered the race early on. This race was supposed to be contested, somewhere where the Democrats could focus a lot of money in and the GOP could start picking off each state. Unfortunately for the GOP, it is not a contested race whatsoever. Josh Mandel dropped out due to his wife's health. They nominated another candidate, and just since then, Sherrod Brown has been very, very good in terms of his campaigning, his approval rating, and then now the polling numbers, which all reflect his positive view from the state of Ohio. So again, another uncontested Senate race from the state of Ohio just 2 years after having another uncontested Senate race from the state of Ohio. So that puts the Democrats at 40. That finalizes all of our safe, quote unquote, safe Democratic states, and Republicans have 42. But let's go ahead and look at the safe Republican states. Obviously, Mississippi and the Mississippi Senate special election are probably going to be safe for the GOP. There was a point in time where the Senate special election could have gotten contested, but 10 days away, we're not going to see much changing. Nebraska, Wyoming, and Utah are all 3 states that are going to be safe for the GOP. Nebraska could have been likely GOP based off original data that showed this race to be within 15%, but that's no longer the case. In Utah, Mitt Romney is just way too popular, way too good of a candidate to lose there. And then in Wyoming, right now, Barrasso is just extremely popular, a Republican in Wyoming. We're not going to see the Democrats have any shot here, so this is a safe Republican state. That puts the Republicans at 47, the Democrats at 40, with 13 contested races, which means that all these races will be rated as likely or lower. So let's go ahead and start a look at the likely Democratic states. The first state is the state of Wisconsin. That is likely for the Democratic Party because Tammy Baldwin isn't doing as good as her Democratic incumbents from states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Minnesota, her colleagues from this area that really are doing a lot better than she is. But it comes down to specific elections, like the governor election could be making this race close. Tammy Baldwin isn't necessarily as popular as the rest of these senators in their Democratic states. So for right now, this is still a likely Democratic state, just that it's very interesting that this one out of them all is closer, but it is expected. This is the state that went for Trump more than all the states characterized blue in this area except for Ohio. But the real big thing is that Ohio is more safe than Wisconsin for a Democrat. But disregarding that, going over to the Minnesota Senate special election, that one is also rated as likely. Tina Smith probably could win around the same margin as Tammy Baldwin. But right now, looking at Minnesota, Tina Smith probably a little bit more contested of a race just based off what happened to the previous incumbent. But she is also the former lieutenant governor, because she is now a senator, so that also adds to her numbers. So when we're looking at it, Amy Klobuchar is widely popular. Even if Hillary Clinton was president, Minnesota at large probably wouldn't flip. And there probably wouldn't be a Senate special election considering the races would be very contested. But right now, that race goes to the Democratic Party in the likely column. So the Republicans are at 47. The Democrats are at 42. Let's go ahead and look at some of the other likely Democratic states. So the states of New Jersey and West Virginia. Those are the final 2 likely Democratic states. Now, it seems crazy seeing West Virginia as a state that Donald Trump won in 2016 by 30% as a likely Democratic state. Not too surprising for New Jersey, just you may think that maybe it should be a little bit more in favor of the Democratic Party, considering states like Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania are all more in favor of the Democrats than New Jersey. But talking about New Jersey, it comes down to the candidate. The incumbent Democrat is unpopular based off a number of scandals that may or may not be true. Whatever it may be, his unpopularity is pretty high. Not nearing Trump's levels, but still unpopular. Going over to West Virginia, we're looking at a state that pretty much loves the president, loves Republicans. Right? Well, not so much. Looking at West Virginia, Joe Manchin is one of those conservative Democrats, ones that really appeal to these conservative states, these solid Republican states in presidential election years that used to have a Democratic identity. States like Arkansas, states like Georgia, states like Florida. But if we're looking at the numbers, probably more of the deeper south rather than Florida alone. If we look at Georgia, that state actually could be embracing a Democratic candidate for the first time in a long time in the governor's race. And then we go over to Arkansas, which formerly had a Democratic incumbent from the Senate race there back in as early as 2014. We're looking at Tennessee, which possibly could have a Democratic senator at the end of this prediction. We'll see. But West Virginia, again, another one of those states. Kentucky, too. North Carolina has a Democratic governor. Kentucky used to be controlled by the Democrats in the state legislature up until 2016. This isn't something like 20 years ago. This was a Democratic state, which it was in terms of where it was back in 1998. But if we're looking at the state legislature composition, that was a Democratic state leading up into 2016. And then looking at a number of other states, West Virginia, not necessarily the most comparable to Kentucky and Arkansas, but if we're looking at the pure numbers alone, they love Joe Manchin. That's really an understatement. They said that if he did not vote, according to this poll, they said if he did not vote, West Virginia voters, and I'm referring to they, would not vote for Joe Manchin, but he would still win by 2% if he had voted against Brett Kavanaugh. Since he voted in favor, that poll said he would win by 18%, and a lot of these numbers coming out are definitely boosted numbers because he did vote in favor of Brett Kavanaugh. But let's go ahead and take attention away from all the likely states because there are no likely GOP states. Actually, wait. Yes, there is a likely GOP state at this point in time, and I failed to characterize it because it was a Democratic state. And now is a Republican state. The state of North Dakota. This is going to look very weird considering this is the first pickup of the night and it comes from the GOP, from Democrat to Republican. Considering that this is supposed to be a Democratic wave year, the GOP is doing very well in these Senate elections. In the last couple of weeks, they've definitely picked up the pace, whether it comes down to the candidates or how the Democrats are underperforming in a number of these states. North Dakota is probably going to go to the GOP by larger than 5%. In the most recent poll, Kevin Cramer leads by 16%. If you don't trust that number, go to the first poll before that, which was Kevin Cramer plus 12%. Before that, plus 10%. And before that, plus 4%. So overall, the numbers are not in favor of Heidi Heitkamp. The last time she led was in February of 2018. Can't really make an argument as to how she could win this race. That puts the Republicans at 48 with one gain from the state of North Dakota. Let's go ahead and take a look at some other lean Democratic states, because those are the final characterizations. No more likely states, just lean states. Montana is probably that first lean state. John Tester's pretty popular, leading by 3, then 8 in the most recent poll. So overall, the numbers right now benefit John Tester, which gives the Democrats 45 and the Republicans 48. Let's go ahead and look at another Democratic race. Actually, I don't think there's any other lean Democratic races. There are some lean GOP races. The state of Texas, that is a lean GOP race. Right now, Ted Cruz performing by around +6, +7, but by the end, with 10 days left, I don't think nothing drastic can happen, but I do think that this race could narrow down in terms of excited turnout amongst minority voters. So Texas, I think, could get narrower than 5%, which could send a message to the national GOP and Ted Cruz and the president of the United States. But right now, looking at a candidate like Beto O'Rourke, I think could narrow down this race, even though 10 days left. It's going to be very hard. There's no way that this race is going to overwhelmingly go to Beto O'Rourke or overwhelmingly go to Ted Cruz. When it comes down to safe states, like I said, in Pennsylvania, that one's not narrowing down in the final 10 days from +18 to +5 for the GOP candidate. But right now, Cruz leads by +6, +7. He could narrow it down to +4, +5 by the end of the election. Republicans at 49, which means that they need one more seat to go in their favor in order to win in this election, and they're going to get it from the state of Tennessee. Right now, the state of Tennessee, Phil Bredesen is not doing too well. Okay, he was leading before by double digits early on in 2018. Not anymore. If we're looking at the numbers alone, Marsha Blackburn definitely seems like she's going to win this race, and larger than less than 1%. So anything between 1 to 5% puts it in the lean column, and that's where around the margin could be at the end of 2018. If we're looking at some other states, let's see if we have any. We don't have any lean Democratic states, but we do have tilt states. The remainder of these states are either going to be tilt or toss-up. So, actually, no. Florida is a lean Democratic state. This race has moved from toss-up to tilt to lean for the Democratic Party. That is phenomenal for Bill Nelson. He has done very well in this race alone, and his numbers definitely have gone up from earlier in October, before Rick Scott led for multiple months. And then now, Bill Nelson leads by +3, +4 in the most recent polls. So if we're looking at the data itself, for some reason, Bill Nelson is doing better than where he was before. Could be Rick Scott is now becoming more unpopular than before. Bill Nelson's popularity rating could be going up. Donald Trump could be going down, or a combination of all three. Overall, Bill Nelson is doing better than before. So now all of the rest of these races will either be toss-up or in the tilt column. So let's actually look at the tilt Democratic states. Arizona is still a tilt Democratic state because Kyrsten Sinema is probably going to do pretty well in this election. We're looking at the numbers alone, and if we're looking where overall Martha McSally could be doing well and she's not doing well in, we have already had the primary. We've already had that unification period between the Democrats and the Republicans where they come back to their candidates and back a certain candidate for the general election. And Kyrsten Sinema still seems like she's going to edge out this race. Again, we have 10 days left in a race that's less than 1%. According to this prediction, anything can happen. This race is not set in stone, where states like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Minnesota are already set in stone. Wyoming, Nebraska, Utah not flipping. Arizona, though, could go in favor of the GOP. These are one of the more contested races that you really cannot fully characterize until the final day. This early out, even though it's 10 days away, this early out for these less than 1% races and calling them for either political party could kill you. And if you're a mainstream media outlet that says Kyrsten Sinema is going to win 10 days out and then she loses. But based off my prediction, based off where it stands today, this is a tilt Democratic state. Another tilt Democratic state is the state of Indiana. Unfortunately for the GOP, that most recent poll that shows them leading by 4% does not outweigh the rest of the polls that show Donnelly ahead. And if we're looking at the numbers alone, it seems like this libertarian candidate could be peeling away from this GOP nominee, which does not help them. In a race that could be characterized by this rating as less than 1%, if any votes are taken away from the GOP, that screws them over. And the fact that this libertarian candidate is polling at 4, 5, 6, even 8 in one poll definitely says a lot to the GOP. They may be losing voters because libertarians typically don't take away equal amounts from Democrats and Republicans. Despite what you may believe, if we look back at 2016, most of those libertarian voters would either not vote or vote for Donald Trump. I get it. There are some Democrats who would vote libertarian, but most of those voters are right-wing in terms of the economic stances or social issues, and they just vote for libertarian candidates because they may not have been as popular as I guess, favorable in terms of their rating of the president. If you look back in 2016, those Republicans that didn't want Donald Trump probably would vote for Gary Johnson over Jill Stein. So keep that in mind when we're looking at this prediction. Not that good for the GOP if they're losing voters to libertarian candidates, especially in states like Indiana, which they definitely have a possibility of getting a pickup in. But if they lose because of this libertarian candidate, that's going to be something that's really going to haunt them for a while. Missouri and Nevada, two states that I have yet to characterize. Nevada is going to be a tilt Republican state. Dean Heller right now is currently leading, but this race is definitely going to narrow down. It's going to be less than 1% according to where it stands today. Jackie Rosen may not be the most popular figure, but she is a Democratic figure in a Democratic state from 2016. Dean Heller is unpopular. But for some reason, these Nevada voters, in fact, in a recent interview, all of them are upset with how the government is ran today. So that may not positively reflect on the incumbent, but many of them are already voting for the incumbent. So this race is very hard to gauge considering that these type of voters are very tricky and they don't really follow the same trend as what they voted in the past. But right now, that's a tilt Republican state. As for that one toss-up race, that is the state of Missouri. Right now, Claire McCaskill is behind Josh Hawley by a pretty good amount in terms of the most recent poll, but still, less than 1% race, enough to move it over into that pure toss-up column. This race is going to be very hard to characterize at the end of the day. The map went from 49 Democrats and 51 Republicans, remaining at 51 Republicans just with 48 Democrats. Missouri could go to Claire McCaskill. It could go to Josh Hawley. We really don't know at the end of the day. She has gotten very lucky having Josh Hawley as her opponent because if this was a stronger GOP candidate, this race would not be in favor of the Democratic Party, and the Republicans would have 52 seats at this point, and the Democrats 48. But right now, when we're looking at the numbers alone, it seems like this race is going to be a pure toss-up, one that's going to be watched till the end of the night, and going to definitely show who's going to win at the end of 2018, the Republicans or the Democrats. And the Democrats right now, according to 538, have a 15% chance of winning the majority in the United States Senate. So again, not the best numbers there. So that wraps up today's video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.